In Russia, warehouses are exploding, everything is burning, drones are coming in. The Kremlin was frightened by the nuclear exercises. Zelensky shows the victory plan to the whole world and Europe. We're talking about all of this now. Yan Matveyev, military analyst. Hello? Mark Rutte said that using Western weapons to strike deep into the aggressor's country is a legitimate legal matter, and Ukraine may well be allowed to do so. But there is a nuance. Let's listen together to what Rutte said.
Возможно, это позволит. Но есть нюанс. А какой? Давайте вместе послушаем, что сказал Рютте, кстати, после встречи с Зеленским и Киром Стармером, премьером Британии.
Back to the discussion. The Ukrainian military has already mapped out its targets and is ready to strike. But the US, UK, and France are essentially restraining themselves in dealing with Putin. This demonstrates their weakness, despite talk of red lines that have not resulted in change.
В конце концов, всегда зависит от них. Мы обсуждали этот вопрос, обсуждался в ходе встречи с президентом Украины Владимиром Зеленским и премьер-министром Великобритании Киром Стармером. Никаких изменений в вопросе дальнобойности для Украины пока нет.
Ян, а вот тем, что ищут лазейки, то ли это должно делать отдельные союзники, то ли вместе, то ли все зависит от одного, другого, третьего, пятого, и вопрос этот все-таки затягивается по тем или иным причинам. Не кажется ли нам, что таким образом Запад стимулирует просто Путина и подобных ему агрессоров масштабировать свою войну и идти дальше, дальше и дальше, пока нам не разрешают бить глубже, глубже и глубже?
Ну, безусловно, в любом случае, любые вот подобные ограничения, самоограничения в каком-то смысле, потому что украинские-то военные и цели уже обозначили, и готовы к этим ударам, но, соответственно, и США, там, или Великобритания, и Франция, вероятно, они, по сути, сами себя ограничивают в борьбе с Путиным, с путинской армией, и действительно они таким образом показывают некоторую слабость, несмотря на то, что при всех своих угрозах
The AFU is demonstrating that there are no red lines, but Western allies are still taking Putin's threats too seriously. In the U.S., the issue is the election. The incumbent government is probably hoping for a Democratic victory, so it doesn't want to take any risks. If Kamala Harris wins the election, decisions could become more proactive and the cabinet more decisive.
Относительно США сейчас вопрос стоит в выборах, то есть, может быть, американское правительство действующее, да, которое надеется победить Трампа и сохранить, да, пост за демократами, оно просто не хочет делать каких-то резких дополнительных движений, которые могут привести к чему-то, что им помешает. Ну и, соответственно, когда Камала Харрис выборы выиграет, может быть, и решения будут более активными, и в целом кабинет будет более решительным.
I like your perspective and prediction that Kamala Harris will win the election. You and I have discussed this more than once on our airwaves. Moving on, there seems to be some response, at least a demonstration, that NATO is ready and able to respond.
Двигаемся дальше. Вот, кажется, какой-то ответ, по крайней мере, демонстрация. НАТО готова и способна реагировать.
Mark Rutte said at his press conference that the alliance had announced large-scale nuclear exercises. So much for Russia's response. Mark Rutte, NATO's new Secretary General, announced that a nuclear deterrence exercise called Steadfast-Noon will begin on November 14th. These regular exercises have been held for many years, but now they are particularly relevant in an unstable world. Rutte stressed the importance of the defense test. This statement could be both a show of force and a hint to the Kremlin that NATO has nuclear weapons. I think it's unlikely that they're very nervous. They're always nervous. And their activity on the nuclear issue shows that, because when you're calm, you're not going to threaten it.
Вот эта их активность в ядерном вопросе как раз это и показывает, потому что когда ты спокоен, ты и не будешь размахивать никакой ядерной дубиной. А если тебе нужно постоянно ее доставать и всем напоминать, ага, смотрите, вот у меня есть ядерная бомба, то, наверное, это все-таки на что-то указывает. Учения НАТО, как вы сказали, они...
NATO exercises happen regularly, so I don't think they were somehow specifically set up for all of this.
Подо все это, но в любом случае посмотрим еще, наверняка они будут более масштабными.
But we'll see more anyway. They'll probably be bigger. Plus, I haven't looked yet, but whether new NATO countries will take part in them. Most likely, yes, Finland, for example. And this is a huge border directly with Russia, which was not there before.
Это такой довольно серьезный вызов, в том числе для российской обороны против НАТО, да, они же как-то выстраивают свои планы для противодействия НАТО. И вот такое тоже будет очень серьезное.
And this is quite a challenge, including for Russian defense against NATO. Yes, they are somehow building their plans to counter NATO. There will be a very serious statement from NATO countries that, look, our area of contact has increased, and therefore the possible threat to Russia has also increased. I think Putin is thinking about it. He apparently likes to think about confronting NATO. That would be an important signal to him. He keeps saying that NATO is attacking him. He's being defensive, but it's confusing because he's attacking us while trying to defend himself. Forbes reported that Russia is using long-range weapons and relocating 90% of its air force in preparation for a resolution. However, it's not clear if that's entirely accurate. Our main intelligence directorate noted drone activity at the Russian airfield Khanskaya.
Прилетик дрона, возможно, боберка, говорит наше главное управление разведки. Знаю, что и вы, Ян, на своем телеграм-канале «Карты и стрелочки» анализируете.
The general staff reports that in addition to catching fire,
И вот видим, что, как сообщает Генштаб, помимо того, что заполыхал там склад с боеприпасами или с топливом...
and in general, it is possible, according to our sources in the main intelligence directorate, that 57 Russian Federation aircraft could have been based at this airfield.
находиться на этом аэродроме, там и Су-34, и Даймонды, и Л-39, и Су-35С, и Ми-8. Мы первый раз...
Su-34S, Su-35S, and Mi-8s. Ian, that we should understand what he was preparing for and the consequences of the defeat known. Now, what does that tell us? This airfield used to be really unheard of, because in general it was a training airfield and quite a few L-39s were based there.
Самолетов Л-39, если по спутниковым снимкам посмотреть учебных, и он находится, на относительном отдалении от линии фронта.
If you look at satellite images, it is relatively far away from the front and generally so small, and it has not been actively used by the Russian Air Force. But I think that recently some planes have been relocated, perhaps from occupied Crimea, perhaps from other airfields that are closer to the front, which are often hit.
По которым часто наносится удар. То есть, естественно, когда авиация перебазируется, она не только летит в какое-то одно место, но и распределяется по-разному.
That is, of course, when aviation is relocated, it does not only fly to one place, but is also distributed to different airfields. This complicates logistics, but it makes the situation somewhat safer. Therefore, if you look at even recent satellite images of the same Sentinel, for example, you can make out airplanes that look like Su-34S.
Мы в ближайшее время увидим от специалистов по этим вопросам как раз уже более детальные снимки и поймем, что за самолеты там были. Но, судя по всему, это были...
It's just that the resolution of the images is not very high. But I think now, after the attacks, we will soon see more detailed images from experts on these issues, and we will understand what planes were there. Apparently, they were Su-34 bombers and some kind of cover for them. Maybe Su-27s, maybe Su-35s, Su-30s, different fighters that usually fly with them. So this was essentially a strike on an active military airfield that is performing military tasks. It was burning pretty badly, which means that it's definitely not grass, not some trees near the airfield, nothing like that, but it does look very much like fuel. The explosions also mean that there could have been munitions, most likely bombs or missiles.
Только что вот единственное, мало кадров с места теперь мы получаем, потому что после, там, наверное...
Yes, of course, the Russian channels tried to make it look like nothing happened. There was no damage. But there was so much smoke that they actually evacuated the whole village, which is nearby. So I don't think nothing happened. The only thing that we are getting now is not much footage from the scene, because probably the last 6 months they have tightened all the rules.
Практически никогда не появляется. Но, может быть, когда-нибудь всплывут. В любом случае, увидим спутник, посмотрим, что там было повреждено.
They may be checking for leaks, as photos and videos from firefighters at the scene used to be released. Now, FSB agents are likely monitoring closely, making such footage rare. Eyewitness video captures explosions, air defense activity, and jets, indicating action at the airfield. Also the reaction to them, the Russians. They were saying, "Mommy, it's a real war." And they just remembered all their relatives and the Lord God. True, they did not, but because the FSB Church, of course, apparently does not assume that. The war correspondents, as far as you have also reported, have criticized the propaganda that says nothing is happening. But this reaction of the public and the war correspondents who say, "How come? Why isn't anything protected?" It is not going to lead to any drastic action by the Defense Ministry. Belosov, who will now simply start defending all military facilities with his chest, because it is them, not meadows, that Russia is dotted with. They lack sufficient air defense systems and don't know how to deploy them effectively. While there's a constant need to protect Putin's residences with anti-aircraft systems, they still face challenges with Ukrainian drones penetrating deep into Russia.
Вокруг которых просто десятками ставят зенитно-ракетные комплексы. Поэтому всегда нужно учитывать, что здесь...
Yes, it is not the southern regions that are being hit somewhere, not the military facilities that are close by, but say the same factory in Tatarstan, the Shahed drone factory. Accordingly, we need to keep air defense there. In general, it is all very complicated. These surface-to-air missile systems are a very scarce resource. And that was, in principle, the point of distributing airplanes to some distant airfields in order to complicate the capabilities of the AFU. The purpose of drone operations is to conceal the location of aircraft while the drones fly to airfields while in air defense range. The longer the drone flies and the more complex its route, the higher the probability of a miss or shoot down. However, such drone strike operations are complex, and if a result is achieved, it requires considerable effort and is not always successful the first time. For example, the oil depot in Feodosia continues to burn, and there are no reports of it being extinguished yet.
И если результат достигнут, это значит, что было приложено много усилий. И не факт, что это вот получилось с первого или даже с 10-го раза. Тоже надо понимать. Но так или иначе мы видим, что ни нефтебазы, вот даже в Феодосии, горит, насколько я понимаю, до сих пор даже. Я сегодня пока не видел сообщения о том, что ее все-таки потушили, или догорело.
In other words, the Russian army cannot fully protect oil depots, oil refineries, warehouses, or airfields with air defense. And I think that at this rate, it will not be able to do so in the foreseeable future. Never, that is, until the end of this war, no matter when it ends, there will still be the situation that Ukrainian drones, and maybe in the future various Western missiles, will come and destroy these facilities. It is impossible to fully protect them under an impenetrable dome, and no one is in a hurry to do so. Russia recently recalled the Shaheds, especially the 400 drones that were apparently destroyed near Yeysk.
Вспомнили мы о шахедах, о них сегодня и в России вспоминали, точнее вчера вечером, точнее вспоминали об отсутствии теперь 400 беспилотников, которые, судя по всему, были разнесены, как мы любим писать в заголовках, под Ейском. ВСУ говорят, это тоже были мы, это звонила я, да, и не только...
The AFU say, it was us too. So, Ian, what we have to understand about how this warehouse, which is 400 pieces, is not covered by anything. How can we get information? Guerrillas are working. I understand.
Я думаю, что за этим складом следили, возможно, и люди на месте, возможно, также там со спутника или с беспилотников разведывательных. Собственно,
400 drones may not seem like many, but the damage suggests the warehouse was under surveillance, likely by people on the ground and reconnaissance drones. This may indicate long-term monitoring to assess the number of drones delivered and removed and to gather other relevant information about the location. Well, as a result, there is an attack, and at the most opportune moment is chosen when the maximum number of drones in this warehouse. Ukrainian sources report around 400 drones, but it's hard to estimate without satellite images. The combat units and drones may be separate, with the drones likely being more valuable than the warheads, which are just explosives. While the warheads require preparation, the drones involve more complex components, like engines and control systems. Therefore, destroying the drones themselves is likely more significant than destroying the explosives. Satellite images will likely emerge eventually. The situation appears realistic, suggesting it was a warehouse for Shahed drones. While other munitions could be considered, we know these drones are often launched from southern Russia and occupied Crimea. The choice of inconspicuous old warehouses makes it likely that drones were indeed present. Especially since they used to be stored right in Crimea. Maybe you remember that somewhere near Sevastopol, I don't remember the exact place now, they conducted a strike and destroyed 50 Shahed drones there in the summer. Well, perhaps they decided not to store more in Crimea itself, because the danger there is even higher. Not only drones or Ukrainian Neptune missiles, for example, can fly there. And there's a British Storm Shadow, yes, because they're allowed to hit Crimea. But not on Krasnodar Krai, not yet. But in all likelihood, it's only a matter of time. While we are able to hit and destroy drones, the Russians are somehow not very successful, both literally and figuratively. The Associated Press has analyzed about 2.0 Russian attacks tried on Ukraine since July 29th. We found out that about 95% of Ukrainian drones did not hit a single visible Russian target, not a single one. 95% is a high failure rate, the material said. It could either be due to improved Ukrainian air defenses, although experts, notably the Olbray organization, believe it could also be due to low-skilled labor. What could this failure rate be related to? I think it has to do with the fact that the Shaheds themselves are no longer practically modernized. I mean, there was a point when the Russian military tried to improve these drones very much. They used mobile communication systems, for example. That is, they installed mobile modems that caught the internet in the sky over Ukraine. Ukrainian SIM cards were there. I don't know how they cheated the system. But the logic was that by connecting to the mobile internet, the drone could refine its location and fly much more accurately along a complex route. I haven't heard anything about it lately, possibly because the project is on hold due to high costs. Equipping each drone with a modem and SIM card is challenging since they are one-time use. Thousands of drones have been sent out recently, with production at around 500 to 600 per month, so there aren't enough complex systems for all of them. So I think the Russian military has decided to do with these drones exactly the same way they do with soldiers on the battlefield. That is, to use them simply as such brute force, to send them in waves, and to use them mainly to overload the air defense, so to speak. That is, when everything is spent on this huge number of drones, plus missiles, which are more precise in any case and more deadly, because, say, a drone carries 50 kilograms of explosives. There are more projectile versions, as I recall. But anyway, yes, the KH-101 cruise missile carries 450 kilograms of explosives. That's still practically 10 times as much. This is their tactic. Launch drones, a small number of missiles, and try to hit a target with these missiles. The target of an attack depends on its nature, whether it's infrastructure or a city. It seems the Russian military is treating Shahed drones as expendable, but they're being shot down more effectively as the Ukrainian military gains experience and learns how to intercept them better. All parameters have generally already been studied, adjusted to them, and they are a convenient target for them. Ian, at the same time, we haven't seen massive attacks, or even such massively combined attacks since September 4th. What do you think is being accumulated? I mean, it's clear that the missiles are there and they're being prepared. I think they are waiting for cold weather. In principle, this is probably the most logical thing that comes to mind. That is, the same tactic that was used 2 years in a row. They are waiting for cold weather, when the power grids will be under more serious strain. People will turn on their heaters, let's say yes. Plus, all the plants that actually provide hot water will be working at high capacity. That's when they'll start hitting all this infrastructure. Jan, but still, we're preparing for cold weather. Germany has given us 2 IRIS-T installations. What is the Russian Federation counting on? Their calculations are simple: mass. They will throw in a large number of flying munitions. They don't have any calculations. They don't make their plans relative to reality. No, they just do as much as they can. They launch as many as they can, and then as it goes. If it hits a power plant, it's mission accomplished. If it hits an apartment building, it's all the same.
Реальности. То есть, да, вот там у Украины столько-то ПВО, значит, нам надо сделать столько-то дронов, и поэтому, когда мы все их запустим, значит, столько-то дронов собьют, а столько-то пролетят дальше. Нет, они просто, у них задача, значит, делаем как можно больше, запускаем как можно больше, и, значит, там как пойдет. То есть, попадет в электростанцию, значит, там задача выполнена.
They act according to this logic, i.e., they have the main task of trying to destroy Ukraine as a whole, as a state, by all means. It is clear that they have different priorities at different times. That is, now there will be cold weather, so their priority is to try to leave Ukraine without light, without heat, without water. Yeah, I mean, when the power goes out, the water supply goes out too. Life is necessary. It is still possible to be in the city without light, even without heat. You can try to get by somehow, to do something privately. But without water, how can you even exist? Especially in a city where there are no wells where you can come and get water or something like that. It's very dangerous, very serious problems. This is their logic. We can put pressure on the Ukrainians now, so we will hit the energy system, the heat-generating capacities, and so on. They don't really care about what they will achieve, what the result will be, how many drones they will shoot down. They are just trying to maximize their capabilities anyway. As I have already said, they do not make any complex designs. That is, they try to simplify everything as much as possible. Simple drones, Shaheds, we see that they have been using them for, 2 years or more. When Iranian drones started using Shaheds, they did not change them at all. If you look at the Ukrainian kamikaze drones, how they have changed from the first days when they started using them to now, it is a very serious progress in all directions. Different models with different ranges, with different warheads, there is a very, very wide range of drones. What did the Russian engineers do? They simply took the Shahed, modernized it a little bit, adjusted it to their conditions. Apparently, they use slightly different materials. That's why they're black. That's probably the main reason. All right, the uniforms are the same, the warheads are the same, plus or minus the same, all the systems are the same. Although during that time, in theory, if they were looking for some additional improvements, developments, they could certainly redesign it. But they don't even try to do that, because what's the goal? Just to overwhelm the masses. Even so, you see they modify their own drones. But the Russians, though, why? They do not modify their tactics in any way. They continue with meat assaults. Even if YouTube is not very fond of this phrase, but nevertheless, it is the same, assaulting our positions. Several materials are coming out on the topic of Putin's endless losses for Pyrrhic victories. Politico reports that September was the bloodiest month for Russia. The Russians are making territorial gains in eastern Ukraine. Experts noted the activation of Russian troops from October 10, 2023, in directions including Avdiivka, Kurakov, Kramatorsk, and Siversk. The most successful promotion plan was Avdiivka, currently the so-called Pokrovsk, Kurakov. Our experts have calculated that for a year, the Russian Federation from the extreme point of the line of contact on October 10, 2024, passed 29.5 kilometers at the cost of endless losses, up to 120,000 personnel, several armies and brigades. These losses and the advance deep into just the Donetsk region, how do they even correlate? Putin is satisfied with the current situation and won't end the conflict unless it leads to Ukraine's complete defeat, allowing him to pursue other conflicts or continue fighting indefinitely. As long as there is a war, you can justify everything, literally anything. A lot of people in this borderline state are ready to buy into it. This, of course, is very bad, but propaganda works one way or another, and it is not enough, unfortunately, to convince these people that everything is really bad.
На это, можно сказать, покупаться. То есть это, конечно, очень плохо, но пропаганда так или иначе работает, и контрпропаганда...
They think that since there is a war, it means that the motherland is at war. So it is possible to be repressed somewhere to be patient. Some moments, which earlier perhaps would have caused a much stronger negative reaction against the authorities, are now justified by the fact that there is a war, and therefore any kind of repression is possible. This is a common situation for any dictatorship. It seeks to start some kind of war to justify its crimes, and Putin is not original here. As long as he can paint a fairly positive picture for himself, as long as he can come out and say, and we liberated another 10 square kilometers, he thinks everything is fine.
картинку вот эту вот рисовать достаточно позитивную для себя, пока он может выйти и сказать, а мы, значит, освободили, да, как он говорит, еще там 10 квадратных километров.
He always keeps silent about the cost of this. Even if we do not take into account any calculations by independent analysts, Ukrainian or Western, Z channels simply write about huge losses. This is the truth, and no one is hiding it. Everyone understands it. Putin, of course, keeps quiet about it. As for the pace of the offensive, I'll tell you even more. There is a very telling comparison. I did a stream this week and talked about it. Since the beginning of this year, after all the Z channels tell us that the Russian army is advancing every day, so it's occupying territory and so on, about 500 kilometers square have actually been captured, maybe a little more. At the same time, the Ukrainian army in the Kursk region occupied about 1,100 kilometers square. I was just comparing it to that square. Which the Ukrainian army liberated in Kharkiv region when they liberated Izium and Balakleya in the fall of 2022. More than 11,000 square kilometers were liberated there. That is, roughly speaking, to simply occupy the same territory, the Russian army will need somewhere around 8 years of such a pace as in 2024. This is to the question of the scale of the situation. Is it that bad or not quite that bad? At this rate, there is no telling how many years it will take for the Russian Federation to capture even the Donetsk region.
Потребуется российской армии, чтобы захватить даже Донецкую область, оставшуюся ее часть, да? Там, наверное, я сейчас по площади не скажу, но там чуть меньше, наверное, половины осталось от Донецкой области, которая сейчас не оккупирована российской армией.
There are many factors that could lead to an acceleration of the Russian offensive, but now we see it slowing down on the contrary. This is also a fact. It can be simply illustrated by looking at a map, even a map of Russian sources. If you look at the same Z channels, the situation is the same. Yes, for example, Separin was captured, but the village of Gornyak is still on the defensive. They cannot capture it. The situation around Selidov is difficult, but the Russian army cannot take the city. Opposite Pokrovsk, the offensive has also been suspended. Yes, Grodovka has been captured there. Yes, they have moved further from Novogrodovka, but for the second week they have been standing there and cannot move further west. Almost everywhere, probably for the last week and a half or 2 weeks, there have been either very minimal advances or none at all. The exception is Ugledar. It was captured. But after that, there is no rapid breakthrough of Russian troops there. They occupied part of Zolotoy Niva, a small village to the west of Ugledar, but it was clear that they would capture this territory because it is really very difficult to defend there. It's really one street and maybe 24 houses, not some big settlement. Now the weather is going to get worse on the front, and I think that the Russian troops will try to attack again. But there is a feeling that unless there are some crises for the Ukrainian army, localized crises, unless there are serious command errors at specific positions and serious breakthroughs because of that, it is unlikely that they will be able to advance far at the same pace. Yeah, 8 years is about the same as in 3 days, only a bit longer. That was just a clarifying question too. Thanks, Yam, for answering in advance. Also, for comparison, during the year of the offensive, Russian occupation troops captured over 1,500 kilometers of Ukrainian territory, while the Ukrainian army, as you said, liberated 1,100 kilometers square.
Более 1500 километров квадратных территории Украины, ну а Курск, как вы уже сказали, 1100 километров квадратных. И
If we compare this with the liberation on the territory of Kharkiv Oblast, it is 10 times less. On the Kursk section of the front, Russian troops went on the offensive, managed to advance, and are storming the village of Lyubimivka. This was stated by a fighter of the AFU. What do we know, and why have they activated? After all, Putin set a goal to liberate the Kursk region by October 1st, but it did not happen. Of course, they may have wanted to, but they didn't have many opportunities. Today, I watched some videos regarding the fighting in those areas, particularly regarding Lyubimovka. There are questions. It's not clear where the Russian troops are, but indeed the Z channels have started to write cautiously optimistic posts saying that it means that the 155 Brigade is on the offensive. Ukrainian channels, just the military and analysts associated with the military, write that there is a serious clash, that there is a lot of heavy Russian equipment. But I think that a large amount of equipment means only one thing. It will be destroyed. Not because I have some prejudiced attitude that if there is a Russian convoy, then it will definitely be destroyed. It's just that the situation on the front is such that an infantry attack is much more dangerous than an attack with equipment now. Equipment is quickly destroyed by drones, anti-tank weapons, and mines. And when there is equipment, the military is always concentrated, either riding on it or close to it, respectively. They are also hit by artillery, drones, and everything else. We see that almost always, if there is a convoy attack, it will be unsuccessful. There was already footage of Russian APCs breaking through to the village of Zeleny. Russian channels celebrated a video claiming they were breaking through and battling a Ukrainian tank, which appeared to be retreating. However, the next video showed damaged APCs, one near Koronev and another making a U-turn to flee. These are likely the same Russian APCs, indicating something went wrong with their convoy, and this will likely become clearer in the near future. Naturally, Russian propaganda will shout how wonderful everything is. Just as they wrote about the aggregate plant in Volchansk, which the Russian military recently tried to recapture. A convoy of equipment with a large number of soldiers was sent there because they really wanted to take back the ruins of the aggregate plant. Some soldiers reached a building and waved a Russian flag, but the convoy was disrupted, resulting in at least 4 or 5 destroyed vehicles and significant soldier casualties for the sake of flag waving. The reports from the Institute for the Study of War, noting that Russians had recaptured the Volchansk aggregate plant, raised concerns. But it really isn't. The Ukrainian military claims there's no evidence of Russian control, but I have no direct proof. The factory's ruins cover a large area, and while a flag was seen in one building, if the Russian military did send a group there, it would only pose a problem for them. The aggregate plant in Volchansk is located deep within Ukrainian positions, away from the front line. The Russian military has resisted there for a long time, relying on drones and limited supplies, but they have generally been surrounded. Sending soldiers back to that same location, risking encirclement again, seems quite strange. Российские военные долгое время сопротивлялись в такой, практически ловушке. Они снабжались беспилотниками. Probably, the Ukrainian military is not against this decision, will continue to bomb and shell this group if it is there. Но в целом они были, по сути, в окружении. И забрасывать снова солдат туда же, The Russian military is limited in its operations and cannot effectively threaten Ukrainian positions as they quickly come under fire. It is only the loss of soldiers. As we can see, meaning is rarely sought by the Russian occupying army. If we send really new soldiers, we are in for a treat, lest we treat ourselves when we treat ourselves, as the colors like to say.
Кроме какой-то пропаганды, кроме вот этого вот желания показать, что да нет, мы побеждаем, значит, вот, обратно захватили агрегатный завод, кроме этого никакого военного смысла для российских военных держать этот завод нет, только потерять солдат.
Our military expert also talks to me. Ian, thank you very much for your very interesting analysis, for the fact that you always investigate everything and always explain the situation that's taking place on the Russian-Ukrainian war field based on arguments, facts, what you have seen. Goodbye, Yan Matveyev, military analyst. You're with me, Iryna Uzlova. Friends, thank you for being with us, for spending this time listening to us. Leave your comments. I'm sure you have something to say, and please subscribe to YouTube on the 24th. All of these actions of yours help our conversations spread and propel the vastness of YouTube. Take care and support the armed forces of Ukraine. See you. We will win.